We've had a ton of pedals in our line over the years, but two stand out as probably the most misunderstood. So let's clear that up today, and make sure you stay until the end for a special message that I have for you. So to understand completely, we have to start back a little bit in time here. So this is going back maybe a decade or so. I was playing in more bands than I'm in now, and I needed a variety of tones, and I needed a pedal that did kind of a few different things. I needed something that would, if I was playing through like a Marshall style amp, it would allow me to have a black panel, Fendery black panel sort of style of clean tone rather than the typical Marshall sound or the Vox sound, depending on what I was using. And I also needed something that if my amp went out, that I could just run my pedal board into this pedal. It would provide that sort of pedal platform amp sort of thing. That would go into a cabinet emulator, then into direct to board. So that would allow me, my amp crapped out on me, that would allow me to at least continue the gig. But the sort of tones that I really needed was something that, at least at the time, wasn't really on the market that much. So I needed a tweed sort of sound, whether that be like a Bassman or a tweed deluxe. I needed that sort of distortion because it's completely different. It's not a Marshall-y thing. It's not a cranked Vox thing. It's just a different sort of sound. So I needed that. So let's dive a little bit more into what that tweed sound sounds like. So let's compare that sort of tone to a cranked black panel deluxe reverb. So one of the things that's completely misunderstood is that if you're using these as a standalone overdrive pedal, so you're just using it into the front input of the amp, you kind of have to approach the EQ completely differently. So you can see what I got here. So let's start with the Black 65. I got the bass way down, I have the mids way up, and I have the treble down. But what I'm really trying to go for here, I'm trying to get that edge of the breakup sort of thing with like a Fender style amp. And then traditionally, for what I do, I would probably stack like a tube screamer or something like that into it to build this tone that is just something different than what I'm going to get with the Vox. And I'll show you what I mean here. So my clean tone with the Vox by itself . Now here's the thing though. When you take a tube screamer, put it in front of the Vox or a Vox style amp, it's cool, but it's different. So just into the Vox. It's just a different type of texture, a different type of tone that if I'm playing a particular type of song that calls for that, it just gives me another tool in my toolbox. Same thing with the Tweed 57. Now keep in mind, you're not going to turn a Vox into a Bassman. But what you can do is you can get sort of the same sort of feel, the same chewiness, because that's really like the Tweed thing. It's like this chewiness. And you can do the same sort of thing with a circuit that's going to approximate that. So here we go. And of course, if you want to go into fairly high gain for what would traditionally be a Tweed style amp, That link right there is it's sort of approximating what you would do with like a Bassman when you jumper the inputs. Same sort of thing like you would have on a plexi. And the settings here with normal and bright. Now, me personally, I like to put bright switches on a lot of pedals, and I do it for this reason. Voxes are pretty bright, especially with the Alnico speakers. They're pretty bright. So I'm going to stick that on the normal, which doesn't have the brightness. Now, if I'm running into something that's a little darker, like let's say a PV Classic 50 or a 30 or something like that, it's a little bit darker, I'm going to use that brighter setting. So I'm not necessarily going off exactly what I would do on the Bassman amp, but it's there if I need it. So I'm really using these tone controls and the switches and stuff to build this sound. So that's one major thing that I think a lot of folks kind of misunderstood about these particular types of pedals. Another great way that I love to use these pedals is using them as an actual preamp. So for example, right now I'm running into the front of my Bravado amp. I've said this before. It's basically like sort of like a deluxe reverb mixed with a twin reverb sort of thing with some tweaks. I have the Phenom distortion here just as an example of, I like to use dirt on showing different amp examples. So let's use some of this dirt going into the Bravado. So that's the Phenom through the Bravado using the preamp from the Bravado. But let's say you have a backline amp and you're just not crazy about it. So one of the things you can do, and sort of another tone you can have with these pedals, is just simply use them as a preamp. So let's try that. We're just going to take the output and go into the effects return. So without any sort of preamp, it's just clean. Not really a whole lot of flavoring. So let's flavor it up a little bit using the Black 65 as the preamp. Let's use the Tweed 57 now. And it's flavored a little bit differently, so it's not going to be the exact same thing, but we're going to use this as the preamp. Another great way to use these pedals is simply at the end of your pedal board. So let's say you don't even have an amp or you're not able to use an amp. Use these as a preamp into some sort of IR loader, then into the DAW or into your mixing desk or whatever. So let's try that. Let's run these pedals, no amp, into the DAW. There are digital modelers on the market as well, and those are fantastic too. Personally, I'm just a bit partial to actual analog circuits. And if we're trying to drive them hard like an amp, if we're trying to really kind of get like that edge of the breakup thing, hit it with the pedal and just kind of push it over the edge like you would a tube amp, I think analog does a bit better here. And like I said before, these pedals are often misunderstood. I mean, they're capable of being used in multiple ways. So it's really the sort of thing that depending on how you're going to use them, you don't want to just assume the settings are going to be one particular way. Like personally, I would not, with these pedals, I would not start with the EQ straight up at noon. You can, but just be aware, there's a very real possibility that that bass may be like at 8 o'clock and the mids may be all the way up, just depending what you want to do. Because these pedals, the EQ sections, are driving the gain stages. So it's more like a shaping thing. You're using the EQ to shape the gain, not like you would like an EQ pedal after your drives where you're like moving the bass up a bunch and, kind of shaping the overall tone after it's done its distorting and clipping and sort of thing. But I told you to wait till the end, and so here we are. So we did discontinue these pedals a while back, and it looks like there's a couple on reverb.com right now, but we made one last batch of these, just one last batch. Once they're gone, they're gone. So there's only a couple hundred available. I forget off the top of my head, but I'll put it in the video. And you can buy them direct from our website. You can buy them from our Reverb store page. And to those that purchase, I'm going to include a special video just for those that purchase brand new, where I walk through in detail these different settings, kind of a little bit more of my thinking. So this is kind of a quicker video, but a little bit more in depth with what I would recommend to do with these pedals, stacking things with it, ways to set EQ, all that sort of thing. So I'm going to go a little bit nerdier on this special video for those that do buy these pedals. So go check it out. Let me know what you think in the comments below as well. And see you shortly with a new video very soon.